When a crime is committed, law enforcement swiftly takes procedures to bring the culprits to justice. While some cases are addressed promptly, others linger unanswered for decades, growing colder with time. Occasionally, a breakthrough brings long-awaited justice, as in the instance of Tracy Gilpin. Tracy Gilpin of Kingston, Massachusetts, was 15 years old when she went to a party near her house on October 1, 1986. By 10:30 p.m., the conference had completed, and she headed home alone after stopping at a convenience shop for cigarettes. She apparently dialed a payphone and requested a ride, but the host rejected. Tracy, tragically, never returned home. Tracy's decaying body was discovered 3 weeks later in Miles Standish State Forest, 14 miles distant. She suffered a major skull fracture, and authorities decided she died the night she disappeared. Despite many tips, the case became cold. More than 30 years later, a breakthrough happened. Boston police caught Michael Hand, 61, with the assistance of North Carolina investigators. Hand's contradictory explanations regarding Tracy's abduction, together with doubts about his presence at a meeting the night she went missing, led to his arrest. He was accused with her murder. Years later, in 1963, a guy found a revolver and 2 watches in his yard. While partial fingerprints were taken from the objects, they did not result in any arrests. The case remained unresolved for over 40 years until September 2003, when officials received a tip about the killer's identity. Although the communication turned out to be a hoax, it pushed authorities to re-examine the prior fingerprints using the newly developed countrywide database. Friends and relatives have always thought of Gerald as a kind and conscientious citizen. He was a successful retiree who owned 2 petrol stations and enjoyed a nice existence with his family and grandchildren. Gerald was captured after his fingerprints were detected on the stolen vehicle's steering wheel and his handwriting matched receipts connected to the gun purchase. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Mason acknowledged to the crime, claiming he was inebriated at the time and sought to cover acts of rape, robbery, and theft. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences. In 2009, his parole application was refused. Gerald later died in prison at the age of 83. Meanwhile, on December 3, 1957, 7-year-old Maria Rudolph persuaded her mother to let her play with Kathy Sigmund, her best friend and neighbor. Despite the dusk darkness, the 2 girls kept themselves interested on the street with a game dubbed, Duck the Cars. According to Kathy, this is when they met Johnny. He presented himself as 24 years old and single, and asked the girls if they enjoyed dolls. Soon later, Johnny asked if they loved piggyback rides. Maria accepted Johnny's offer of a piggyback ride. She then went inside her house to collect a doll she wanted to show him. When she returned, Kathy had gone home to fetch mittens. Maria and Johnny had already left when Kathy returned outside. Kathy informed Maria's family, and when they were unable to locate her, they phoned the police. Within an hour, authorities began seeking for the young kid. They interviewed neighbors and passers-by, but no one reported seeing a person playing with the girls. When the FBI entered the inquiry, they followed the period and found Maria was most likely stolen between 6:45 and 7 p.m. 5 months later, some 100 miles between Sycamore and Woodbine, Illinois. 2 visitors hunting for mushrooms along US Route 20 discovered Maria's skeleton bones. She was dressed in a shirt, undershirt, and socks, hidden beneath a half-fallen tree. Because Maria had not been transported out of the state, the FBI withdrew from the investigation, leaving it to state and local authorities. Before continuing on, the FBI questioned prospective suspects, including 18-year-old John Tessier. John was going to enlist in the United States Air Force and stayed with his family around 2 streets away from the Ridulph home at the time Maria went missing. When his alibi was probed, John claimed to be at a recruiting station in Chicago, 40 miles northwest of Sycamore. Records verified his statement, proving that he spent the day sightseeing before returning to Rockford via train that evening. He arrived at 6:45 p.m. and made a collect call to his parents at 6:57 p.m., requesting transportation home. Phone records supported the call, and recruitment officers confirmed that they met with him roughly 7:15 p.m. The FBI terminated his file after verifying that his alibi remained solid. After 13 years in the United States military, John became a Milton, Washington police officer. However, in 1982, he was charged with statutory rape after abusing a 15-year-old runaway. In 1994, he was terminated after serving a one-year probation period. By 2011, John was in his 90s and employed as a security guard at a retirement facility. In 2012, he was tried in DeKalb County for raping his half-sister Jean and kidnapping and murdering Maria Riddle. The former case was dismissed for a lack of physical evidence. Richard Schmack, the county state attorney, investigated the case and decided that important evidence supporting John's alibi, his collect call from Rockford, 40 miles distance from the crime scene, was suppressed from the trial. Given the ice road conditions, he would have been unable to drive that distance in the required time. Diane Jackson, a 25-year-old single mother, went missing after parking her automobile at her Houston, Texas, office on December 14, 1969. Later that day, William Bell noticed a man leaving a neighboring shack. He discovered Diane's body while doing his investigation. She'd been raped, strangled, and severely stabbed. Police collected latent fingerprints from her automobile, but no immediate suspects were identified, and the probe fell cold. Decades later, Diane's brother David, now a Texas Ranger, fought for the case to be reopened. In 1989, the Houston Police Department re-examined the material but identified no similarities in local or state databases. 14 years later, examiner Jill Kinkert checked the fingerprints against the FBI's national database, which identified James Davis. Davis, a habitual criminal newly released from jail, was linked to the crime by fingerprints discovered on Diane's car. Investigators discovered him at the Texas-Arkansas boundary and identified him as the perpetrator. On October 22, 1989, 11-year-old Jacob Wetteling, his brother Aaron, and their friend Aaron Larson biked home from a convenience store in St. Joseph, Minnesota. A masked man with a weapon rushed them, prompting them to drop their bikes and lie face down. After asking their ages, he warned Jacob's 10-year-old sibling to walk into the woods and never return back or face being shot. Jacob was abducted. Danny Heinrich was questioned in December 1989 regarding the kidnapping and abuse of Jared Sherrill, a 12-year-old boy. Earlier that year, Heinrich's DNA matched evidence in Jared's case, but the statute of limitations had gone, ergo he was not charged. Heinrich's role in Jacob's case was not made public until October 2015, 27 years later. A search warrant discovered the finding of child pornography, precipitating Heinrich's arrest. Heinrich admitted to abducting Jacob, handcuffing him, and driving him to a gravel pit, where he abused and eventually killed him after hearing nearby sirens. He buried Jacob near Painesville, 30 miles from his house, then reburied the remains a year later when they were discovered. Jacob's remains were identified using dental records. Heinrich was sentenced to 20 years in jail for child pornography, with the judge adding that he is unlikely to be released due to the nature of his accusations.